Let's talk
Okay.
about history of Grosvenor Road Studios, formerly Hollick and Taylor Studios. Richard, to you, it's more than just studios. It was actually your home.
It was indeed, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to live at Birmingham's own Abbey Road?
Well, the weird thing is, it's, you know, when you kind of look back on this now, and I miss it more now, and you know, both my brother Chris and I both kind of feel now, God, I wish we'd done more in there as children, and which we did, obviously, but I think if I was there now and it was, you know, mine now, I'd simply sleep in there and just be in there all the time. But obviously it was amazing. I spoke to my mum this morning just to get a couple of dates to find out when it was that Dad took the building, and when the sort of the large studio was added, which was 1973. And I said, but that's really strange, because I can remember riding my little go-kart round on the building site when they put the concrete floor down, but I would have been 4. But yeah, I can remember it. So yeah, it was an amazing thing to be part of, and I'm just so proud of it. And it's great now that it's becoming a piece of history.
It totally is. I mean, Jez, there's not many people who know more about the Birmingham music scene than you. Are you able to share with us some of the artists or music people may know that has been recorded or been through the studios?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I should say happy birthday to John Taylor. I think he's reached that amazing milestone of being 100, which is just fantastic. So happy birthday, John. A really, for me, important stalwart of Birmingham's music history, heritage and culture. And secondly, just listening to Richard, then it's, wow, fancy growing up in Grosvenor Road Studios. I mean, it's just incredible, because the building itself, we should paint a picture. The building sits in an area called Handsworth Wood, and if you don't know the city, that's in the sort of north of the city, and was quite a prosperous area way back when. You know, big houses. I imagine surrounded by quite a lot of land. And Grosvenor Road Studios sits on this road, and it's quite an imposing building. It's a beautiful looking building as it is. But to sort of go back to your question, Richard, it's often described, and I would describe it, it is Birmingham's answer or our own Abbey Road Studios, such as is its importance locally, but also nationally. I think it's one of the oldest, probably, I think even maybe the second oldest continuing working recording studio, and it is steeped in history. It's got a really varied history, from Hollick and Taylor as a sort of record label, going into Grosvenor Road with the recording studios, now with Black Voices who've got hosts. It's got this continuous sort of history of music, and it's played host to people from John Bonham of Led Zeppelin was first ever recorded at Grosvenor Road Studios. I mean, that in itself is a massive piece of music, global music history. Noddy Holder, when he was in Steve Brett and the Mavericks, first time recorded at Grosvenor Road Studios, and obviously Noddy would go on to be, fronting Slade. That in itself is a huge piece of music history. All the drumbeat bands who were there, who recorded there, the Move, Spencer Davies Group, the Moody Blues, drumbeat in the 60s, rivaled Merseybeat in Liverpool. In fact, there is a bit of a feeling that there's more people or more bands in Birmingham. This is the trouble about sitting downstairs and you have 2 seconds. Sorry.
Okay.
We should have put a disclaimer at the beginning saying, there might be household noises as children and small pets, but...
Do you know what? Was it like this in the studios? Would they, have you got Noddy Holder recording and then you're upstairs on a go-kart?
It would have been me coming back from school going, Dad, I'm home!
You did it in a Noddy Holder accent. Sorry, I'll just finish up. So, there was a point in the 60s where Birmingham, rivaled or even had perhaps more bands than Liverpool, and obviously Liverpool with the Beatles and Merseybeat is massively important. But Birmingham was a very futile place in the 60s, and all these bands would come through into Grosvenor Road, either rehearsing or recording. Then you'd have, you know, into the 70s, you'd have, you know, Handsworth is in a predominantly, what is now sort of what you might consider a black community. And so you'd have the reggae bands come in, bands like Steel Pulse would come and rehearse and record there. For me, the most interesting, after all, having said all that, the most interesting part, and we've talked about John Taylor, is Jean Taylor, Richard's mum, who also worked at the studio. And for me, he's a bit of a forgotten woman of electronica. And I say this, and Richard can talk more about this, but I say this because at Grosvenor Road Studios, they did the sound effects for Jerry Anderson's Thunderbirds and Fireball XL, and created a lip syncing for Super Animation, I think it's called. And if you look online, you can see Gene and John in the studio creating these sounds, and you see Gene with these working these massive big machines, like electronic machines. And for me, she's our Delia Derbyshire, you know, or our Daphne Oram. It's really important in terms of very unusual to see women in recording studios anyway. And even more so, you know, working the machines, creating these sound effects, you know, putting things onto tape. So that's a ramble, but it's such an important place and space, Grosvenor Road Studios. And the Taylors, as a family, all of them, Chris and Richard, with their work now, are an incredibly important piece of Birmingham music history and their contribution to our music culture. So yeah, so it's a ramble, but honestly, it's hard to understate how important for me and for the city they are, and we need to amplify and elevate their story and the role that they've played within Birmingham's music.
I mean, we absolutely do. You're 100%. I mean, Richard, we've just heard about your mum and your dad in the studio. How much time were you in the studio during any of these recordings, or how much did you even see and hear going on during that time?
Well, I mean, obviously, you know, I popped in and out if I kept quiet. There was in Studio One, there was a sofa which was on the studio was split in two levels, where the mixing desk was, and then there was a lower level, and there was a sofa there. And if there weren't many clients in, I was sometimes allowed to sit on that and watch what was going on. And as I got older, yes, I was sometimes sit next to Dad. But like I say, a lot of it was like, oh, I don't want to go in there. It's boring. I want to go and play outside. So you know, it was only really once I was into my teens that I really kind of took notice of what was going on. And you know, obviously, a lot of the stuff I don't remember. It's funny. I messaged Jasper Carrot the other day because Funky Moped was done there with Jeff Lynne, and Jasper's doing a birthday video for my dad. We've got in touch with various people who have had some lovely video messages coming through, which Dad will be really touched. He doesn't know we're doing it, and Dad doesn't even usually remember his birthdays. He's never been a birthday person, never remembers our birthdays or Mum's birthdays or wedding anniversaries. But for this one, he just suddenly seems to he's really excited for it, and so he should be. So yeah, a lot of it I don't remember. There was always odd celebrities coming through. You know, the Crankies. I remember meeting the Crankies. I mean, I don't know how old I would have been, but I remember meeting the Crankies. Gordon Jackson obviously was famous for The Professionals. That was a big thing when he came through. And I can remember when we did the launch for Cliff Richard, he did an album launch there, which I think was for EMI at the time, for the I'm Nearly Famous album. And I can remember that. I can remember being thrown out of there many a time. Mum, will you stay out of there, Richard? And I just wanted to go in there and see what was going on. And it's funny seeing the new photographs of Grosvenor now, and it's a shame it's been decorated because there was always a champagne stain in the ceiling in Studio One, where the first champagne bottle was popped and the cork hit the roof. And I always remember Mum in a bad mood because she'd done the catering for this big album launch, and she'd been over to Macro in Hellzone and bought all the food and done all this food and laid out, and she'll always remember the story of I don't even know his name, but Cliff Richard's chauffeur, he stole all the lots of crockery and lots of empty dishes and glasses and stuff. He put them all in his boot, and Mum went absolutely spare. So yeah, she never got them back. So yeah, there's odd things that, and as you talk about it, things do come out. I mean, I wasn't around when all the sound effects were being done for all the Jerry Anderson things. I think I wasn't born yet. I was probably only a twinkle in the eye, but I remember Jerry very fondly, Uncle Jerry. And in fact, Mary Anderson, she sent a message to Dad. Obviously, Jerry passed a few years ago, but I can always remember the toys that Jerry used to bring for Chris and I. Things now, which of course would be worth a fortune. You know, we were given the original Dinky Toy prototypes. So I can remember I had little Thunderbird 2, which at the time was blue, it wasn't green. Because either Matchbox or whoever it was decided that children didn't like green, so they made it blue. But I had the prototype of that. I had an original Space 1999 Eagle model, which was used on set. God knows.
That's your pension.
I know. And then strange things like so Charles Hollick, who was Dad's partner, an absolute genius of a gentleman. There are still things in the studios now which Charles built and designed, and he would always draw these rough schematics of how he was going to make something, be it a patch bay or even copying the insides of a remote control for something. And he would jot these schematics down, and they were all jotted down on the back of Thunderbird scripts, which, you know, Dad's still got a lot of these. He's got a lot of these schematic diagrams, and they are on the back. And Chris and I used to do all our drawings and doodles on scripts from Thunderbirds and all sorts of things. So yeah, I wish I'd got them all still.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, as you talk about it, it's just, I mean, it's mind-blowing, some of the stories that you're talking about. And I just love how it's so ingrained in kind of just your family and your life there. And it just, I mean, it seems, as you've said, it just seems incredible now. But I'm sure at the time you're just like, this is my home and this is what's going on.
You take things for granted. Much as how I took gigging for granted, and now I can't do that anymore.
Well, I mean, that's such a great segue. I mean, obviously it has had an impact on your life. You know, can we talk a little bit about what you are doing now?
Well, I mean, I've always, the strange thing is that, you know, when Dad was, you know, sort of thinking about retiring, both Chris and I, we didn't want to be sort of stuck in a studio. And we concentrated more on our career as live musicians. But obviously the studio side of things it's always there, and it always has been there, and has played a part in my work every day as a live musician. And I've carried on, you know, sort of doing writing and production as well as being as a live musician. So I've been lucky that I've been able to do more stuff in my own studio at home during lockdown. There are so many musicians that only have their live elements and totally rely on gigging, which has just been terrible for everyone. So I have been lucky. Not that it has been a great deal of work. You know, everybody's cutting back. You know, there are various artists that I've produced for, and you know, you sort of approach them and go, look, now's the time. Do you need anything doing? I'm not gigging. Of course, well, it has a vicious circle. They don't need anything because they're not doing anything either. So, but yeah, I have my studio, and I've had a project all through really the last summer and still going now, with another musician friend of mine, Dan Carpenter, who's a horn arranger and an amazing trumpet player. We decided it all started all by remote at first, to just write music that we wanted to write. So we've been writing kind of 80s funk, boogie, that kind of thing, and been having an absolute blast with it. And just nobody saying it has to be 3 minutes and 15 seconds long. It has to be this, it has to be that. Just doing what we want to do. And it's been great fun. It's come to a halt again now. So we're back in just the writing process of sending things backwards and forwards as we can't get together. But we've had some great musicians play on it as well. So we'll see, that's in the pipeline. Maybe later this year, we'll either just release it ourselves, and you know, if nothing happens with it, I don't mind. It's just been great fun.
taking it back to the studios, which was acquired by Black Voices in 2003 with the support of the Arts Council, the studios are managed by a voluntary board, which brings a huge diverse skill range and knowledge of the music industry and the community development. It's being redeveloped and modernised to better serve the local community. Yes, why do you think these studios are still so important to the music community in Birmingham and beyond?
They're the lifeblood, you know, and not just Grosvenor Road, but as I say, cultural venues. The big cultural venue that you work at, Richard, is just as important as Grosvenor Road Studios, because it gives us, you know, places and spaces to identify ourselves, to express ourselves, to learn, to educate, to come together, to have experiences. So it's very hard to put a price in, but you know, I think Grosvenor will be okay. I think it'll survive, because I think bands will still want to rehearse or record, even though the recorded industry is tailing off, or seeing a reduction. But again, local bands, local musicians, youth, which actually would go back to Grosvenor Road Studios to the sort of 50s and 60s, you know, with youth bands and local ensembles going back to record there. So it could be full circle. So they play much more of a part than just being a building that you can pay £10 an hour for to rehearse. And they give us so much more. And perhaps it's a moment in time where we can articulate better the cultural value rather than the economic value of music and of people who work within the music business, industry, sector, whatever you want to call it, and we see it for much more than what it is. They're just such important places.
I totally agree. And Richard, like, when the studios were acquired by Black Voice back in 2003, what did that mean to you and your family to know that legacy, those studios were going to continue to have life in them, music in them? How did that feel?
Amazing, particularly for mum and dad, because I think dad would have moved and retired a lot earlier, but he just blatantly refused. He just didn't want that building to be turned into a block of flats. So it was hugely important for him. You know, and it also, just because it still says GRS, and you know, that's what it's being called now. And I spoke to mum about this the other day, and she said that's just amazing, because that was every record that was made on the Grosvenor label. The catalogue number was always GRS, and then the number after it. So it's amazing that it's being kept going. Yeah, I'm the only one that has actually been back, and I kind of get that it was for mum and dad. It was, you know, something that they'd been in. I mean, dad took that building, I think it was 1948. I think he took that building, so been in it a long time. So for him, it was doors closed, it's finished, I've retired, and he didn't really want to kind of go back. He's been interested in the last few years to see pictures of it and to hear stories about it. And I think my brother Chris now is ready. He wants to go back. Obviously, the strangest thing was when I first went back, was seeing what was our family home. You know, the studios were all on the ground floor, and we lived on the second and third floor. And to go back and see what was our lounge, and my bedroom was now a little office. So it was strange, you know, not upsetting, because there was enough about the rest of the building being used and kept going to sort of cancel that out. So, but yeah, I'm thrilled, absolutely thrilled that it's still there. I can't wait to go back again now, and to you know, give something back to it as well. Be a part of it, whether that's passing knowledge on to anyone there, or go back and do some engineering and some production in that room. You know, Studio One, that control room and that studio are amazing rooms, and particularly that live room. There's hardly anything like that. You know, and suddenly even the studios that are still going, they still don't have live rooms of that size with that ceiling height. It's an amazing place, you know, and it's mum and dad's legacy. So yeah, a very important part. I'm really, really happy that it's carrying on.
Amazing. And you've just touched on passing knowledge on, and earlier you were talking about, you know, your own studio and producing work. Are there kind of tips or tricks that your parents passed on to you that you still have in your mind sometimes when you're
Absolutely.
yeah,
Every day, whatever I'm doing. You know, obviously music has changed so much with technology and recording. As you know, everybody's a producer now, everybody's an engineer, everyone's a musical director, everybody can do it at home. And there are some amazing results coming from home. It's a lot easier than it was, a hell of a lot easier. Even if you do have the training that I had from Dad, it's a lot easier. But still, I find these days it's all about, it's becoming more about your eyes. And I've said this before, and a friend of mine, Simon Dougal, who's from Handsworth, who did a book about engineering, and I remember actually putting this piece in there. People mix with their eyes these days. They look at plugins and they look at their screens. I sat here, I'm looking at 3 screens now for where my door is running. But yeah, we tend to mix with our ears. We'll look at a compressor and look what it's doing. And go, oh yeah, that looks about right. That's about the right amount of compression. It's not about that. It's about the ears. So passing on tips and tricks of what's the best setting for a compressor, for a vocal, when it sounds right. And that's what Dad would always say. It's about your ear. And that comes to the same thing about mixing. Dad will say you can mix in any room. If you know what that room sounds like, you can mix in it. You can mix in a cave. If you know what that cave sounds like, then you can mix in it. So it is a lot of it. Yes, there is great stuff coming out with how music technology is working, but it's years of experience and years of listening to different types of music. It's nothing about musical tastes. It's about listening to how things were recorded. Now, literally just a couple of days ago, somebody sent me on Facebook Messenger. He'd found a Hollick and Taylor recording from 1963, which was straight onto acetate, and he'd sent me a YouTube link of this recording. It's covered in crackles and bangs, you know, and it was recorded in 1963. The mix on it and the leveling and the balancing was incredible. And you know, still to the day, well, not so much in the last few years, Dad's hearing is disappearing, but he would still listen to mixes of mine. I'd be so nervous playing him anything, because, you know, he would still critique it. He would still say, oh, there's not enough top end on that vocal. There's too much reverb. I can hear distortion on the compressor. So, you know, it's always still to now, Dad will still pass on comments, and there's always something to learn from Dad, be it mic techniques.
In that moment, Richard, are you kind of a professional taking that advice, or are you like a kid again going, oh, Dad, leave me alone?
No, not at all. So, no, not anymore. No, I think, yeah, I take it on board. I mean, there's, you know, there's a lot of things that, you know, that have changed that, you know, Dad doesn't understand now. I think when Dad retired, it was just that the brink of digital recording was starting. You know, we changed from a 2-inch multi-track, and we're using ADATs when Dad left. So we were at the brink of it. You know, and Dad still had, he still has, where my brother built his studio up where we live now in Lincolnshire. He still has a room in there, and he was still going in there, and he did a lot of copying old 78s onto DAT or digitizing them and trying to clean them up. He was still doing bits like that after he retired. So he still gets, you know, what's going on, but he will pass stuff on, and I will still ask him. I had to do a harp recording recently, well, last year, and you know, I've been years since I've done anything like that. Obviously now in my own little studio, it's just guitars and vocals I ever record. It's very rare that I do anything else here. But I asked Dad, where's the best place? What's the best place to record it? So for that knowledge, he'll still pass it on. You know, his tricks on miking a drum kit up, you know, they're I'm not telling anyone that. And he's got some great tricks of how to record drums and how to record strings, best way to mic a piano, all those sort of things. So there were always things that, in the last few years that I was at the studios in the 90s, would have been about 95, I think. I used to produce a blues artist called Keith Randall. And we used to experiment with all sorts of mic techniques of miking amps close up at one end of the studio, and then at the other end of the studio, just put in two Neumann U87s right against the back wall, which is, was quite a distance. And and then there was all things that Dad used to come up with about phasing, and there was a way of doing. I think one of the pictures I sent you actually was there was a school choir in there. And obviously, if you wanted to monitor anything, if you didn't have enough headphones, you had to use the speakers in the studio. And he taught me a trick there of running the playback in the studio for the speakers out of phase, so it didn't pick up on the mics as much. There's a bit more to it than that, but it's an old trick and it works. So I've used that recently. So yeah, always
a lesson.
Yeah.
Always. And to wrap this up, Jez, you've got a whole load of vinyls behind you. If people are kind of watching this and thinking, I want to listen to something that was recorded at those studios, so if either of you got a particular album or artist that you're like, go and listen to this. This is the one that you should listen
to. I would probably go the Senators, and that's the band that John Bonham was on, because I think you get a sense of Bonham and his drums, and he was from what I know, was an absolute beast of a drummer. So just listening back to what Richard was saying, I mean, the idea of 100 years of accumulated knowledge is just, it blows my head, to be honest with you. All that knowledge wrapped up in one person, and then that being passed down. So listening to Richard there, I would probably say, go back and listen to the Senators, and to I think it's available on YouTube, and get a sense of what it must have been like in that studio at that time. It's 62, 3, something like that, I think, and unleashing the beast that would become John Bonham, that would go on to be one of the world's biggest ever bands. And imagine being John behind, in the studio control room, probably didn't bat an eyelid, probably didn't think John Bonham is just another band coming in, but just to be a part of that moment in history, and to see the setup of the studio. And as an example of the sort of music that came out of there, I would suggest that. I mean, there are loads that, honestly, the floral dance, the massive big 70s floral dance was recorded there. It was the Brick House, I think it was, and then Terry Wogan did it. But we mentioned Funky Moped, which is Jesper Carrot, was like a sort of a novelty song, but actually it was a bit more than just a novelty song. Then Jimmy Powell and the Five Dimensions, I think, recorded there. Jimmy Powell, from Kings Norton, one of the amazing. Check out Jimmy Powell. I'm not sure if there's any recordings from Grosvenor Shoes or released on Holly Taylor, but check out Jimmy Powell, who had one of the most amazing blue-eyed soul voices. Unbelievable. So, sorry, again, there's loads. I would. Senators, check out Senators.
Amazing. And Richard, is there one that you're like?
I was going to say, actually, that the floral dance.
Amazing.
You might laugh at that, but that goes back to my memories of when I started to wanting to use in the studio, and Dad would never let me go near multitrack. He would until I'd learnt the art of recording a band. And getting it right, going down to stereo left and right on 1/4 inch. Until I got that right, he would not let me go anywhere near multitrack. And obviously that floral dance was done on multitrack, but very, very early on. So a lot of the balancing was already done before it went down onto multitrack. There aren't many people around still today that would be able to record that in that way and get that sound. And as far as I'm pretty sure I'm right that the recording that Terry Wogan sang over was Dad's recording. It may have been remixed, but it was Dad's recording that Terry Wogan sang over. So yeah, and I actually looked at before I emailed Jasper the other day, I looked at I listened to Funky Moped. What a great recording!
Yeah.
It's a gimmick song, but what a great recording. So there's lots out there. Yeah, too many to talk about.
Sure. Thank you both so much
You're
for
welcome.
taking the time to chat about the studios and about your dad turning 100. That's insane. That's so exciting. I hope you have. I hope however you're able to celebrate.
Waving at the window probably, but which won't be as good, but it'll still be an occasion.
Yeah,
it really will. It really will. Well, speaking of waving at windows, I think I'm going to do the same now. This one.
Thank you both so much.